Does seem brighter, doesn't it?
No, I need some surgical procedure. Procedure we can get tonight.
I had to tell her.
Ready when you are.
All right, we will call to order the January 18th Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission meeting. Jamie, do you want to do roll call?
Chair Steenblock,
Here.
Commissioner Miller,
Here.
Commissioner Ramseth,
Here.
Commissioner Steenblock,
Here.
Commissioner Moorhead,
Here.
Commissioner Geyer, Commissioner Gary.
All right. All right, then we'll look for an approval for tonight's agenda.
So moved.
That's right.
Hey, maybe add something. I had put a request into you about belts, and I don't mean the belts plan, belts question, so I don't know if you can add that to the agenda anywhere before we vote on it.
In regards to belts, the warming house,
No, usage, hours, just information on
or
belts.
like a staff update on, in regarding to the rinks.
Right.
Yeah, I can do a staff update on that.
Oh, okay. All right. Then that's the only question I had.
So should we add 7B staff update on belts? All right, so we had an original motion and a second. We've made an adjustment, adding 7B, which would be the staff update on belts. Do we have a?
I move to approve with the addition of belts.
Second.
Any other discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. And Jamie, I don't see anybody here for open forum, but did you receive any?
No open forum
Okay.
tonight.
All right, so then we move down to 5A, which is the chair appointments.
All right, so members of the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission, we are in our first meeting of the new year, so we always start that with chair appointments. So we appoint chair and a vice chair to serve on the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission. This is via nomination of another member, or if somebody would like to volunteer. And just as a reminder, we do these as two separate motions. One would be for somebody as the chair of the Parks Commission for this year, and a second motion for a vice chair. So with that, opening the floor to any nominations or volunteers in the commission.
Nomination of Terry Steenblock,
For chair?
chair.
Do we have any other? What,
Discussion.
do we? Sorry, I was distracted slightly there. Okay, so we have no other discussion on the chair?
Are you willing?
Oh, yes, I'm willing, thank you. Okay, hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And I'll abstain. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, next on the list is the vice chair position.
Vice chair now.
I nominate Tim Miller.
Do we have a nomination for Tim Miller?
I'll second.
Any discussions or other nominations? Do you accept? Okay, all right. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No, abstain.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. It was weird, all of a sudden, like, everybody's phones were going, like, multiple different, like, I can't concentrate.
Turn mine off.
All right, so then we move on to 5B, which is the Fenway Fields Rehabilitation Project.
All right, Chair and members of the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission, included in your packet is a staff memo and a quote from Peterson Companies for a project consideration at Fenway Fields. For quite some time, we've had ongoing safety concerns with the 5 fields at Fenway, so the quad, the 4 softball fields, and then 1 baseball field, which is Field 5. Throughout the years with the dragging of the fields, additional egg lime, they've become uneven, they've caused, lips that are, safety hazards for the users at the fields. So Public Works Director Dave Adams worked on this project to determine the needs out there and worked on getting a quote together. Everything's outlined in the staff memo, and the quote's pretty detailed on what this would entail, but primarily all 5 fields at Fenway would have the regrading and restoration done at the fields. There are other components included in the quote with the work that would need to be done, but essentially it would be regrading and restoring those fields back to a good condition. Some of the benefits of this, obviously, it eliminates the safety issues that have been brought forward multiple times from the association, which is our primary user out there. Once this bigger project is complete, we can schedule this tolerance work every 3 years, so that will just help us to just kind of touch it up as we go from here on out. It's a maintenance, planned maintenance at that point, so we'll plan for that every year just to keep them in good working, playing condition. And then with this project, we can utilize some of the funds that we did receive for 2022 for improvements to parks and trails. So this would allow us to use $80,000 from our park dedication fund, where those dollars will be going. And then additionally, we can also use some funds from the park maintenance and improvements annual budget. We will seek out grant opportunities, and also if there's any other funding sources, whether it be the association themselves or other groups interested. So it's a good project to get the Fenway Fields, in great condition and attract more teams and users to Fenway Fields as we continue to improve our facilities. With that being said, this was asked to be on the agenda tonight. If we can get approval relatively soon, they need to schedule staff and resources to do this project in 2022, which could be scheduled for late July or early August. So with that, staff recommends approving the quotes provided for this project at Fenway Park. With that, I'll turn it over for any questions and discussion from the commission.
Yeah, Jamie, I've got a couple questions. There was mention made that they were going to use the topo of the original construction. And that was very errant. You could stand in center field, and the center fielder couldn't see home plate. If you stood at home plate, you couldn't see below the center fielder's knees. So, and they had to go back and do a bunch of work, and I don't know. So when they're saying original topos, they need to do something different there.
Okay.
I noticed that you're talking about this survey, and on one of them it was 5,300 and the other one was 2,800, but the scope of the work was going to be the same. It's identical. So why the difference there?
So you're looking at the last page, the 2860, and then page
On the front
2.
page, on the front page, or yeah, second page, correct.
Okay.
That just for each set of fields, charging a separate fee?
Yeah, I don't know, I mean, the scope of work is identical, so I don't know if they're looking at 1 field or 5 fields, or.
The difference is the first one is 4 fields and the second one is 1 field.
They've got it subtotaled out for softball versus the 1 baseball field.
All right, but I guess my bigger concern though is that, is the use of the topos from the original topos. Because Field 5 was a disaster. And did other people submit bids or just Peterson?
I believe that, I would have to verify, I think this was our best quote that came forward. I don't know what other companies, if there were quoted in this, but we can certainly make note to not use the original documents from the original
I guess I'm a
project.
little concerned too, but you've got a guy who specializes in roads and, you know, that sort of construction doing a ball field, and it's significantly different. You gotta get some crowning in there, you know, you've got drainage things you have to be aware of. I'd like to see his, I guess, his documents to say that he's qualified to do a baseball field. And particularly this scope where you're doing 5 fields. I'm just not comfortable with that. And, you know, I guess too, we had an issue, was it this summer? Where they needed some ag lime on one of the fields, and the ag lime was dropped off, dumped, and left. Game was scheduled, and all of a sudden, they had to scramble around trying to find rakes so the teams could actually do the raking to get the field playable, because you couldn't have a pile of sand or ag lime sitting behind home plate. So I guess that, you know, I would also put in the notes that if you're doing this work, and, you know, now ball game should be done by this, there shouldn't be an issue. But I wouldn't start working on any field, completely dropping off ag lime if there's gonna be a game scheduled that night without, you know, doing the complete job by putting it out, tamping it down, watering it, and the whole deal, and making it playable.
Yeah, and I can make note of that, and I think some of that too will be resolved as we're continuing city field scheduling and having an athletic facilities committee so that we're more in a line of what's going on and when games are scheduled so that we can coordinate those maintenance tasks so that situation shouldn't happen again moving forward. So I think some of those processes we're gonna have in place will eliminate that from happening, but noted.
Like I said, I'd be real curious to see what other companies, you know, that Peterson was going up against, what those bids were. I'd like to see them.
I agree with that. I think it's,
Because we don't know, you know, we have nothing to compare this to.
Where did this come from? How did this all of a sudden become, I mean, this is a pretty sizable amount of money. And how did this all of a sudden become a priority for us? Like, can you give us some context on why all of a sudden this was initiated and?
So over the years, we've gotten periodic inquiries from the Baseball Association and out with FLAW that it's a concern and we need things maintained and improved out there. I believe that doing this large project all at once is just it's more cost effective to come in and do everything to get it back into a playable condition. So it's taking that opportunity to do the big full scope of the project now that some funding has become available to Parks and Trails for improvements to Parks and Trails. So that's where this originated from, where it was evaluated and the recommendation of the full project at once came forward. I believe we could split up the project and break it down, but again, it's more cost effective to come in and just, you know, get everything done at once, and then that's why it's recommended, once we make this investment to improve the fields at this larger scale, then it's scheduled maintenance on their CIP every 3 years, so that it's just keeping it up and maintaining it so that we don't have another big expense like this. So this is years of how accumulation over 8 to 10 years of this becoming a problem. It hasn't been maintained probably how it should have over the years, and now it's kind of come in and get our fields back to the condition that they need to be in for safe play, and then scheduled maintenance moving forward. So that's how it originated, just some inquiries, and we, like I said, could probably break it down, but again, recommended by staff to come in and do this, and it's a good project using the funds we have now available for improvements.
I guess one other thing I was thinking about too is that, you know, if they're doing it every 3 years, you know, that's fine for, you know, adding ag lime and things of that nature. But again, you have to be aware of the pitching mounds. You know, they have a tendency to break down. And so I again would be curious if that $25,000 every 3 years, what all is included in that. Because again, talking about safety issues, that certainly is a big safety issue with the pitching mounds. You can't have them slippery, you can't have them low, you can't have them high.
Yeah, and I think without getting into too specific of what that 25,000 would cover every 3 years, I mean, we could evaluate that and get a better estimate, but I think that's a placeholder in the CIP of knowing that every 3 years we'd have that expense and we could
But somebody
fine
must
tune
have had
that.
some sort of an idea to come up with $25,000.
Right,
So
right.
that should be a pretty easy thing you're expecting.
Yeah, I can get a little more information. I'm not certain right now of what that 25,000 would cover, but it should be to come in and, you know, maybe, I'm assuming that's like the high end to come in and, you know, make sure everything's still good to go.
We all know 3 words and assume.
Yeah, I'm a little confused in all the talk with Flaw and the contract negotiations, that I don't recall them having a substantial safety issue. So it has hit me out of left field here, the pun intended. That now we're gonna be spending, what is it, 80,000 from the park dedication fund, pushing that ahead of other projects, but I do understand if it's a legitimate safety concern, that is one of our primary roles, so that's just my 2 cents.
Any other
I was
thoughts?
just dumbfounded to see this large of a project at an action item when we just got the information, today? So I'm not going to be anywhere near ready to pass this. There's a lot more questions that I have. And as favorable as I am to Fenway, and will always be, and want it to be the best it can be, we still have belts on our plate. And talk about, we now have money to do something. If we now have money to do something, we have a large project that's coming up that I think the majority of us have been ready to go. And so I'm just being open about the fact that I didn't have any information about this, and I'm not at all ready to have an action item on it.
Yeah, and it was available last week online. I just didn't send a link to it until today with being out of the office, but you know, we can certainly, if you have questions that need answers and I don't have them today, I'm happy to, you know, we can circle back on that. So I guess that's where we would be at if you guys have questions that I need to follow up with other staff for answers and more information.
So if I was to summarize, it sounds like we're not ready to make a decision yet, and if I was to summarize, we need some clarification on the
Topography, topo
Thank you.
maps. Yep.
Thank you, maps, and what's being used there. We also want to see whether or not other companies bid on this and what the qualifications were in relation to that. A breakdown of the $25,000 reoccurring maintenance and what would be included in that. And I would also like to see a breakdown of this, the actual repeat piece that we got, just little things that stuck out to me. Batting cage, we have 5,360 for using small equipment. Then it says, we don't have any new ag lime figured. We could use the excess ag lime. So is that cost then just the 5,360 for utilizing small equipment, or what is that? So a better breakdown of these costs. And then also trying to understand from a safety standpoint, what is the urgency now if these are repeatable issues that came up in the past? And I know we have added ag lime there to try to address those safety issues in the past. So what has changed in relation to those safety issues that did not address? And if nothing has changed, then why wasn't it pushed forward earlier as a bigger safety issue? So if we can get clarification on those things. Is there anything else we need?
Good summary.
And then we can bring it back here for discussion and potential action then.
Jamie, just as a side note, I think when the Diamond Doctor did a mound, I can't remember. But anyway, it was about $7,000. So if you're doing one mound for 7,000 out of 25,000, I guess I'm just real curious about where that 25,000 and how that 25,000 was going to be spent. because there's some
Yep.
fairly expensive things that need to be done on a periodic basis.
So
Do you want a
okay, that-
motion, like a motion to table?
Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to table.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, so moving on the list, we are down to 6A, which is the Parks Commission updates with City Manager Casey.
Yes, thank you. Let me plug this in first. And if you can get that. up on
Yep.
the screen. I think one of the largest questions that I heard was about funding and what approved this last budget for. Sorry, I'm in between glasses. I have to take them off. Drives me crazy.
We understand.
So, one of the things we looked at in this budget process is, we've heard over and over about funding parks and trails and so forth. And in the past, there's really never been any or much interest in doing that. So in developing the budget, we were looking for a way to at least begin to try to figure out how to fund it. And last year, we started with that by at least identifying $50,000 in the levy to go to the parks, and hopefully that would continue. The original thought was to continue in increments up to a certain amount to be determined, so that you could depend on more funds except for in addition to your dedication funds, because it's not unstable, but it's cyclical. You don't get them all at the same time, as you know. Development's good, you get some. Development doesn't happen, you don't get anything. So it makes it real difficult to budget and to do things. So when we were looking, and I point your attention to two items on this spreadsheet. One is the capital equipment fund. That's where the city buys all its large rolling stock, plows, trucks, fire engines, whatever is on wheels, and whatever other large pieces of equipment, that's where that comes from. And then, of course, the parks and trails line item. When we were looking at capital equipment, the next few years, we're going to need a lot of large pieces of equipment. 2 fire trucks at least, a plow truck every year, and then just replacing police cars and pickup trucks and everything else, that lawnmowers, zero turns, all that kind of thing. So the capital equipment fund was beginning to run short on its fund balance, and we weren't sure we were going to be able to buy all the equipment that we needed to buy in the next few years. One of the things we looked into is leasing equipment. There's something called I'm not going to get this right, equipment certificate that we are allowed to bond to fund the payment of that equipment. Basically what it is, we choose it's like a lease. If you go to a car dealer and get a lease, it's a 3, 5, whatever the years you want. When we looked at that, we found that current rates on equipment certificates were 0.8%. You don't see that very often. And being that these pieces of equipment, fire trucks and plow trucks, I'll just keep using those two, but there are more. Those are 20-year life of pieces of equipment. So we looked at it carefully and said, okay, does it make more sense to lease those with a short payment return? So probably a 3 or a 5-year lease. Because why try to, you get to a fire truck, the current ones we're looking at are $800,000 a piece. If you get to a big ladder truck, it's probably $1.5 million by now. So does it make sense to try to pay for all those at once? It'd be great to be on a cash basis like that, but we've got a lot of needs here that we need to cover, whether it's in parks or whether it's in equipment or whether it's, and also then try not to keep too much pressure on increasing the levy to where people are, not real happy with us. So what we came up with is we are going to buy certain pieces of equipment out of the capital fund using these certificates and spread those payments on a yet to be determined basis at the 3 or 5 years. What that did is freed up a substantial amount of budgeted money in the capital equipment that we could transfer over to the Parks and Trails Fund. And we do that through the levy. So if you see here on the capital equipment, prior to 2022, we bonded $800,000 for, not bonded, the levy was $800,000 for the capital equipment. And if you saw this originally, it was going to go to 850 to 900 to 950 to $1 million to $1 million and keep going up because you have to figure in the inflation and the cost of replacing all that equipment. So instead, we were able to do this, and we were able to free up approximately $400,000 in bond levy dollars. Now, sure, we'd have liked to switch that every year, but being the demands on the capital equipment as well, we couldn't do it. Plus, these large pieces of equipment don't always happen every year because of the way they're, the way they're bought and things like that. So we looked at a scenario which is reflected here of making that swap every third year, basically. So 1 year on, 2 years off, 1 year on. So the fourth year, it goes back. So this is what this lays out through 2030. So just as, not to need to explain it, but so this year, and it's been adopted by the council, the Parks and Trails Fund, or we're gonna put it in the dedication, but got $450,000 that you've never had before. This should be able to give you at least a head start on some of the things you need to do. Then if you follow the rest of the schedule, we will levy $50,000 at 23. We want to start to incrementally go up with that. We can only afford so much, so 60,000, and then the 450 hits again. Then we go to 70, then we go to 80, then we go to 450 in 28. 29, it's 90, and at 2030, it's $100,000 we're levying to go to the park fund. Now, none of this is guaranteed past this past year. I mean, who knows what's going to happen next year, the year after, but at least we have a plan and some kind of guidelines of hope we can commit to, and the council can see that we've done this and they're committed to it. But I won't tonight here tell you this is how it's going to stay. I'd be probably out of a job if I told you that was going to stay, but no. So I think this is a good thing to do. I think it's a smart way to fund the largest pieces of equipment we have, the most expensive pieces of equipment we have. And if I can get 0.8% on a 3-year lease, why wouldn't I do that? I mean, it's almost like 0% interest on buying a car. So now I know the bond rates lately are going to start to creep up, but it's going to take a long time for those to get to 2% even. So for now, in the foreseeable future, at least for the next 2 or 3 years, it's probably a good method. Depending on what happens in inflation, if inflation starts to really go up, then the bond yields change and those prices go up. But I think this is sustainable. I think it's a good way to do things. The other alternative is to try to do some kind of a referendum for park funding. And I'm not sure we're ready to do that yet and what the projects are that would meet that. It would take a lot of work in a capital plan, but also be on this type of a committee to go out there and hit the streets and say, we need money and here's why we need the money, and try to convince people to vote for it. So at least this is a solid plan that starts to give you some kind of capital. You've got big plans like Bell's Park and things like that. This doesn't entirely meet those needs, but it does give you over, the life of the plan here, $1.85 million, which is a pretty big jump from 2 years ago, I would say. That's the dollars. The other thing, by identifying some of these dollars, I believe it puts us in a better position to apply for grants. Because when granting comes about, they ask for matching funds and how you're going to afford it. So when we talk about Belts Park, we're going to recommend you apply for the DNR grant and hopefully get the maximum of $300,000. So if you kind of look at this right away, you got if you get a grant for $300,000 and have $450,000, you're at $750 already. And while the Belts Park plan is $2 million, at least you can start to do a major impact on the first side of it and figure out how to phase that or as we anticipate this year having a number of new housing starts and developments come into town, 5, I believe, at least, close to 300 homes, you will get some additional money in your dedication fund. So, questions on this?
Back in August, we got kind of a budget, a nice little budget form that all us simple people could kind of take a look at. But it looked like we would have a balance at the end of 2022 of just over $1 million, $1.1 million. So that this 400,000 this year, 450 is on top of that. And no, understanding these are estimates.
I believe you're talking about our current park dedication fund balance. That was at, without looking at that document, was there a projected amount for additional revenue in '22?
Yep.
With-
100,000.
Okay, so you're correct. So current fund balance is around the 550 or $600,000 ending of 2021. That's the unaudited balance amount. And then based on the developments Administrator Casey mentioned, it's projected we could see around 400,000 in additional park dedication. So what you're referring to is current park dedication funds, projected revenue for park dedication developments coming in, and then so this would be additional
Thank you.
into that.
How are you with?
Is this where I could ask about the progress on storage units and getting park dedication fees on that?
Yes, certainly. My honest opinion, park dedication fees and the language in our code is a little bit confusing or not very focused on what it should be. It's just not written well, I don't think. I believe we, I think it's next Wednesday or the Wednesday after to meet with the attorneys to sit down and talk about park dedication fees and how to make them apply to all development instead of some development. The way it's written currently and understood currently is that park dedication fees are only applicable when land is subdivided. That's what it says. So yeah, it's great. I come in and I take this 40 acre and I subdivide it into 100 lots. So that's where you get your money. Well, what if I had that 40 acres and just put one big commercial piece of structure on there? Well, it doesn't apply. That's the way it reads. It's really an odd way to, in my opinion, an odd way to administer that kind of fee. So what we would like to do, and we're going to talk to our legal counsels about how do we change that so it's not on dedication's not only on splitting land, but it's on all development, whether it's, you know, it's the exception where, you know, I put up storage units and I don't have to pay anything. And I think I went round and round with the planner that has left us now, but so we're going to look at it and try to get a clear ordinance that addresses that and applies to all kinds of development.
Do you know how communities around us treat it?
There are a number of different ways they do, and some do apply it to all development. Some apply it only to homes. That's what we're going to be discussing. I think we should be able to apply it to all development, and it shouldn't rely on if the land gets subdivided. That's the trigger. The trigger should be any new development, but and residential have a certain formula, and commercial has obviously has to have a different formula. Retail has a different formula. I mean, it's easy on residential as a per unit kind of calculation. So if I'm building an apartment building with 100 units in it, 2,500 times 100. Not so clear. Commercial is supposed to be based on acreage, and retail should be based on acreage, or it could be on square footage of whatever structure puts up. We have to determine all that. It needs to be done. I don't know who wrote it the first time. I don't know how it was written or why it was written, but and then we also need to look at and see if we need to adapt that fee and make it higher compared to the rest of our neighbors.
I see Chair Moorhead and Chair Steenbach.
Okay, I was
Commissioner.
just under the impression that we did have a commercial, that we did pay for, commercial did pay park dedication
Not
fees,
in all cases.
but in many.
Well, that's been part of the issue, is that sometimes it's been applied, from my understanding, and other times it has not. And I'm not saying it's anybody's fault, but it's screwy, to be quite honest with you. It's just not the way. We need to be clean and understandable, not only for us, but for the developers. They need to know what they're gonna have to pay. So if we can't understand it internally, or we have disagreements internally about how it's supposed to be structured, imagine what the developer wants. So it's better for us to take a new look at it, write it so everybody understands it, and so that you understand, and basically hopefully can forecast revenues down the line here a little bit better than we do.
Apartment buildings always subdivide? Do they meet that, always meet that?
Yeah, usually apartment buildings do. Now, here's differences in our fee schedule. We have it direct in our fee schedule, but yeah, usually you don't find that 40-acre piece, and you're gonna put an apartment building on a 40-acre piece. It's smaller, but, so you see this, we're starting to see why we need to take a look at it. And hopefully we'll have that by spring resolved somehow.
Gonna ask something? No.
I know it's confusing and I sound like I may not know what we're doing, but I know what we're doing. We just need to make it better.
No, it's much more information than we've gotten
Yes.
to date, so thank you.
Yes, so thank you.
Yeah.
And we look forward to seeing the changes
As do
this
I.
spring.
As do I.
And I will say thank you, because I know I was awfully hard as it relates to the budget dollars. So thank you for pursuing those, and thank you for coming and explaining it as well.
No, and you're talking to a guy who's undergraduate at the Parks and Rec, and we need more Parks and Rec. We need more parks, we need more space. The strategic plan brought out that people want to come here and have trails and parks. It's clear on the results, so can't do that without money to do it. And I know that in the past you were encouraged to take the money and run, but in my opinion, you need to balance that out with getting land, because land disappears. And if you want to then buy land later on, it's more expensive. So it's better to try to get it as part of the development or some kind of hybrid. So that's what we can talk about now. I know there's some talk about how do we determine that and things like that, and when do we bring a development proposal forward to you. Okay, and one of the things that happens is when we bring those site plans to you, the developer comes in and he talks about that, right? He says, here's what I want to do. Well, then what you don't know is they come back and they start negotiating against us because of what you, so we have to stop that, because they keep trying to back us into a corner. The proposal that I'll tell you right now is that we will come to you once we have a firm development and a plat and can identify what kind of park is going to be there or what kind of land, and we'll give you a professional suggestion or recommendation on what you should be looking at. What I don't want to do is have you say, oh, that's great, we want to do this, but then the developer comes back and says, well, and here's what happens. The park board said this, and the park board said that, and the park board said the other thing. And when they don't always, you guys don't always say that stuff. So it's a better task for us internally as staff to negotiate the best deal we possibly can and bring it to you. Now, if you don't like it, fine, we can go back, but we have we know what you want, kind of. We want the same things. We know we need more parkland. It's just how to get it and where it's going to be and where it makes sense. So what we'd rather do is bring you a full laid out plan that's been cut through and modified and all that. So what's the current one we are out?
Hidden Creek.
Yeah, the Hidden Creek one. They came to you, I think they gave you but you know how many iterations they came with us after that? Probably a half a dozen. So it's really, we really need to bring to you what we believe is the closest to the final plan. And then if you say, okay, well, we don't want 3 acres, we want 4, or we want 3 acres and we want you to put equipment in there, or whatever the case may be, that way we can decide. But we need to come to you with a full recommendation so that we're not going back to the developer 6, 7, 8 more times and trying to negotiate this stuff.
Hidden Creek is a good example of, I think we saw that one here 3 different times.
Yep.
And the last time we saw it, it did not take into consideration on what we voted on in the previous meeting.
Welcome to my
So,
world.
so as you consider the plan for that one, can you go back and look at what we voted on
sure.
because that was one where I think we had the discussion about the parks around it and the county park to the south, and that was one where we had made a motion to take a combination of land and cash. And so,
We'll go back and look at that. I don't recall what that was, but I think the current iteration has a 3 acre park. And we've asked them now, that's pretty well set, but what we've asked them is to what you call ghost platting the south. This is because they want to do another phase. So tell us what that looks like, because say we have the 3 acres at the bottom, which I think it is. What we want to do is say, okay, give us more acres here. So this becomes a 6 or an 8 or a 12 acre park.
and that's what
where
we
we're trying-
talked about.
That's what we're trying to get to.
That was our last on, I think it was November 10th, because we saw it April 21st, November 10th, and December 15th.
Yeah, and you shouldn't have to see it 3 times.
No.
You really shouldn't. I mean, that's not a waste of your time, that's what you do, but, we should all kind of be on the same page so we don't have to negotiate against ourselves a little bit. I'm hoping that the way it works. We have other subdivisions where we're doing the same thing, saying put the park in this corner, because we know the next empty 60 acres here will come in and we'll put another park up. So we'll, want a bigger park. That's what we're trying to look at. And then we can decide if we want, what kind of amenities you want. Do you want it as just grass and a passive park? Do you want a walking trail? Do you want, does it need a tot lot instead of a whatever, so.
That makes a lot of sense, because I didn't realize all this other stuff was going on. So this one was like, why are we looking at this one again? And why are we having these same discussions again? So that makes a lot of sense.
And then there's a lot of players too involved, the city engineer with the street and public works with the streets and the infrastructure and where there's gonna be trails and sidewalks and which side of the street, and all of that plays into the concept plan as well. So we're just the parks component, and the Hidden Creek one was a good example where I said, if we're not on the same page, or we shouldn't have to see it so many different times, and kind of the middleman. So internally, staff has a standing meeting to work together to get that final determination that'll come forward one time to the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission.
And the same thing's true with trails. We know where the trails are, we know where the connections make sense. So the subdivision's up here and we have a new one come in, and there's a trail here, we sure want them to connect to that trail. And those are kind of the goals we're looking at.
This just all falls back into the communication that should be going back and forth with us at the time, so it's not something that is just thrown at us too to make a decision, because we had lots of good decision on that particular piece, and I wouldn't want to lose that conversation that we had and just have someone bring it back. So I agree that you should look at what we had agreed or talked about at that time, and then make sure when the agreements are coming from the staff that they've had some communication, or maybe come to the meeting when it's brought to us, and so that we know
We'll
it's
be
not,
here for that.
nothing better than have both players at the table.
I mean, we definitely need to be in the room with the developer when that comes, so that there's no misunderstandings. So,
And that is part of the plan moving forward. Our interim zoning administrator can attend meetings, or at least one representative from the planning side of things moving forward, so that they can kind of bridge the gap between those conversations and lead that piece of it. This is also kind of a newer period of time for us. We've had, like Administrator Casey said, take the cash and run. We've had a lot of cash payments coming forward. So we are kind of transitioning into new to us, or this period of time of we really need to assess each development coming forward for some land and cash, or just land, or you know, it's different. So we need to look back to our 2040 comp plan, where we see future parks and look at that big picture. So as these developments are coming forward, as a commission, we can say, okay, here's where we plan for future parks. Let's evaluate that, and as staff as well, we can all be on that same page of determining where future parks go if needed. So it is a little different with transitioning our, looking at that land piece. And we used to just get a staff memo from the zoning administrator to take the cash payment, and that was approved, and we moved on. So it's a new process, I think, for everybody, different players involved, and I feel good about the process moving forward.
Yeah, the other thing we're doing, just so you know, it really doesn't have to do too much with the committee, but when development comes in on Wednesday mornings or afternoons, depending on the time, we have a development team meeting. That means everybody who has anything to do with anything should be in the room. So Jamie's in the room, I'm in the room, engineers in the room, public works is in the room, and the planners. That's never happened before. It doesn't happen before. So, you know, somewhere, I don't know, developments were, you know, magically under a code, I don't know what, but there's a good reason to have a public works director, and there's good reason to have an engineer. There's good reason to have a parks person and a planner in the room, so we can all talk about the pros and cons of what the development is. We haven't had that until the last month or two here, and we're going to even strengthen that more by bringing the attorney in on that same group, so that when we write the development agreements, actually the attorney's looking at them. That's not just a boilerplate. So it's kind of just a different process that we're going through and trying to get everybody, because there's good ideas out there from the public works director. There's good ideas from the engineer. There's things they can point out that I have no knowledge of, you know, how water flows downhill or whatever, but, you know, they know where the water flows, they know how the street should be laid out, they know how the sewers, where they're going to be, what the right-of-way is going to look like, so they need to be in the room too, and that includes parks and trails and things like that, and that's why Jamie's in the room. And that's why I asked Dave to be a better part of all this, because he's going to have to maintain all that stuff, and he should have knowledge on development and how to plan it and how to develop that park as well. And what, you know, if you say we're going to put this swing set playground over here, he may say, well, how are my guys going to get there, right? Let's make sure we can figure out a way to do it. So those are the kind of things that we're trying to do, to have more voices in the room, so we have a comprehensive look at all this development, and we come back with a solid recommendation, not only you for parks, but to the plan commission for the developments, for the council for the developments.
So is that kind of getting at one of the questions we had, which is what Dave's role will be in working with us? Is
Yeah,
that
he will
what
be
you're
part of
talking
this.
about?
And you saw today this memo from him about the maintenance, and he needs to take a bigger step, and not that Jamie doesn't know, but Dave knows a lot more about the maintenance side of it and the development than Jamie does. It's just what he does. So he needs to be a part of that. He needs to be a part of, you know, how that lays out, how that gets maintained. And there's good ideas he has, there's, you know, not so good ideas he has, but yes, he's going to be a part of that, stronger part of that, because in the long run, he's going to be responsible for most of it.
So I guess my question is, so just for an example, we have, I mean, I've been on the Parks Commission for a long time, and Fenway was the big thing we always wanted to pay off, so we got it paid off, everything's great. And we needed the cash payments, so we could just barely touch some of our parks. Along with that is the one that's behind, on 61 behind
Southview.
Southview. I mean, we pulled out the equipment, so we have land there. And that's where it's hard to actually say that if we want to take land versus cash, we're not utilizing the land that we have.
Right.
So your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, you have to be twofold here. One of the reasons why I say you take the land is because on the south where the development is, you're not going to put any parks in. No, you need parks there. People can have parks. That's just whether you develop it or not, that's one thing, but you need to have the land. Again, because if you don't, then it's all full of houses and you have no place to put parks. And then if you want to have a park, you have to buy it from somebody at 3 times the price. What needs to happen? and I think that some of it's been done, but I don't know the last time it's been done, is you need to do two things. One, you need an inventory of all your park and park equipment and rate it on condition. So Southview, did you say, is it?
Yeah, we
Okay.
pulled the.
So let's take Southview. So you inventory the parks, and you put all the equipment that it has. I think it was done in maybe one of your study along 2014 or something.
14, yeah.
You need to update that. And you don't have to have a firm to do that. You just need a spreadsheet and somebody with a pen. So you do the inventory of the parks. How many acres is it? What's the equipment? What's the shape of the equipment? Rate the equipment 1 to 10, whatever. Then you come back and say, okay, this park doesn't have anything. It should have what's your vision for that? Then you start to fill in those blanks. Okay, we want equipment at Southview Park, sorry. Southview Park. And that becomes part of your capital improvement plan. You really, because of the way things have been done here, you really don't have a capital improvement plan.
That's what I'm getting at,
You
because.
don't, you need a capital improvement plan.
And I mean, I really appreciate what's coming on, but I mean, we're still behind the 8 ball.
Oh, you're
Way behind the 8 ball.
But you got to start somewhere. There's 2 ways to start it. 1 by funding, 2 by a capital improvement program. You need at least a 5-year program. And that means inventorying all your parks, rating all your parks, and then deciding what the priorities are. Obviously, Belts Park is a big priority, and it's $2 million. And does all the money go to Belts Park? Or do we try to phase that this year, this part of it goes and the other part goes, and then some of it goes to Southview Park? So that's what the challenge here is to get that inventory and rating done. And now you're not gonna go out in the middle of winter and do that, but come spring, Jamie should go, I'll give it to her to do. Jamie should go in and maybe with Dave or one of the public works guys, and often that's, the past I've just had a public works guy out and drive around that, or an inspector. And with a sheet and start to fill in, what do we have here? Well, we have a swing set, we have a teeter-totter, we have a monkey bars, we have a pavilion, we have this.
So it's essentially taking that 10-year financial plan that we did, where we prioritized the parks or listed the equipment, and reevaluating that to see if it's still accurate or makes sense. The one thing that we didn't do on that plan, because again, we didn't have funding and didn't know when funding would come to fruition, and what you put there could change significantly based on when we're able to put something there.
Absolutely.
So, but we can at least.
You have to start to slot those projects in years.
Yep.
And every capital improvement plan that I've ever been with is a 5-year capital improvement plan at the minimum. But every year, you go back to it because things change, priorities change. In one city I was at, maybe the fire department didn't get their new refrigerator, let's just say. Instead, you put in a swing set. Or the parks didn't get the rehab of the swimming pool. Instead, it went to the police lockup is falling apart, we need to do. So, being that structure, you are in competition with the rest of the city, but by this, at least you're starting to identify dedicated funds that you can use. But what you have to do is you have to start to slot where those projects are gonna be. And they will move backwards and forwards depending on priority, depending on how much money do you have. You may see a swing set today that looks like a 9, but next year, well, you didn't see all the rust and everything, and it's a big crack in it because of the winter, so now it's a 0, and you need to take it out and replace it. So it's a big project. I mean, it's not small stuff, but that's what we need to do.
So maybe a future agenda item is to bring back that 10-year plan and reevaluate and then update the equipment. I
start
don't
by
have it in
updating
front of
Park
me, but
inventory.
yeah, there was some pieces of
I
inventory that we put
would
on
make it
there,
a
but-
goal by midsummer to have your park inventory updated and rated. No, it's not that difficult, and if I have to go out and show somebody how to do it, I'll do that.
I agree, that's a great idea, and I think we've tried to do that in the past where we as commissioners can do things like that. And we've taken different parks and gone out and done an inventory of what it was, so we already have that information. We just have to keep updating it, and it's one
Yeah,
of the-
that's another way to do it. I mean, if you all want to volunteer and we split the parks up 7 different ways.
Yep, and
give
I,
you a rating scale and inventory scale.
so I think, and that's, I think he's kind of touching on some of the roles and responsibilities. That is one that we're gonna be working on. I started in the fall, going out to a few of the parks, took some pictures to start that process, but getting the Parks Commission involved in small groups and assigning parks and getting that inventory. I also applied for a grant, with Washington County for up to $10,000 to see if we can get funded, for master planning. So we can look at that 2014 master plan that's been done for parks, but just take that step further of updating it, and working on our capital plan to align our new priorities. I mean, we had for several years since I've been here, the same items on our capital plan because it was only funded through park dedication funds, whereas some other, departments have the general fund option for that. Lights at Fenway was on there for years and still is a need. So we just have to evaluate where that priority is and update all of that. So the capital, park inventory, and then the building out a capital plan 5 to 10 years, are two big projects that need to happen, Q1, Q2 of this year, to align with now some funding that is available so that we can plan our work out and then update that 10-year financial plan as like a third step in that process.
And just a final recommendation, what's on the screen isn't enough money, right? It's still not going to be enough. I would strongly recommend as a board or one or two of you show up to budget meetings and say, one of you, maybe two of you or three of you, and say, okay, we've got this plan, we need more money. Every year, we need more money, we need more money. Let the council know that you've done your homework and that you think you need to be more funded. And, maybe you get there. Predict, again, what the priorities are, but you need to begin to be the advocates of the council for these things.
So I had some other questions I had sent to you that were from us.
Fire away, whatever.
All right, so we had the one about looking at the community development position. There was mention of parks work in that position. Can you help us understand
Yeah,
what that will look like?
traditionally in these smaller communities, often you see the parks underneath the community development department or public works. Choose one. Well, that's in the job description, just so that any community development, if we decide to make that person that comes in, knows that he or she may be responsible or at least help guiding it. Again, that person also should be part of the development team that, that person will be helping to run those developments, so it needs to be integrated into that. Whether that's going to happen or not in the immediate future, I don't know. The first review of resumes for community development director were awful, to be honest. So we're going to have to go back out and look for another. So being the way the employment stuff is these days, but again, that person's should be as a community development, and again, it's community development, should be in tune with parks and because it is part of the development process.
Okay, so then talking about Jackie's position, which was a position we advocated for to get some assistance there. I know Kathy had said that she had asked for some restructuring of that to make it more of a set part-time position.
Yeah, it's not a full-time position any longer. I believe there's money in there for either 20 hours a week, or if you want to go a seasonal from April to August or September, one of the two, depending what the demands are. I mean, where's the most need? That's up to Jamie to tell me which one it is. Is it better for you to have somebody come in and help her with programming, which is, the summer, spring, summer, fall, early fall is probably the toughest, the most busy. So do you bring somebody in that way, or do you bring somebody in all year round at 20 hours a week? I think you have to discuss what Jamie has to tell us, or tell me what's a better way, what's the need.
Senior Center now falls under the umbrella of this commission. So can we discuss what our role is as it relates to the Senior Center?
Yeah, eventually, once we get our feet on the ground, I think we're starting to finally make progress and get it all settled down. Eventually, what I would like to see is the tomorrow, I think, is going to be a vote on the new advisory committee for the senior center, the seniors. What I'd like to see is them report to you on a regular, quarterly basis and give you an update of what's going on in the senior center. Right now, Jill is reporting to Dan and I kind of about how its operations. And just like the golf course, it was just a quick thing we had to all figure out, and we had to find somebody to do it. I think we're finally getting mostly past it, but what I would anticipate is that they would come here and give you an update on what's going on at the senior center.
And then I think this last one is probably one of the most important ones we had talked about, but understanding the process for which things come before us, because we've had some instances where this Peterson is a perfect example, whether it's 1 week. 1 week in a proposal seems like an awfully short period of time. We've had the instance with the clubhouse, and so what can we expect as far as new initiatives or requests or, whatever it may be, as far as those coming forward to us and giving us the opportunity? And I'm going to use Peterson as an
Okay,
example
which is good. I was
here.
going to ask you, let's use that example.
So-
What would you have liked to see there?
So I guess to have an action item, I'm going to echo what Karen said, to have an action item when we've only had a week to be able to look at this. And
So what's an acceptable time period?
And
Well, don't take this particular one. So you get a packet for each meeting. When do you want the packet? What's an acceptable, is it a week before the meeting?
well, I would like something comprehensive that at least helps us understand. I mean, again, I brought forward the safety issue on this one. So if we've heard in years past that there's been a safety issue.
Absolutely,
We've
yeah.
also heard that we were putting ag lime in there that was going to address some of those safety issues, but now all of a sudden we have a proposal. So we are missing context as to why all of a sudden is this a #1 priority when it hasn't been. And funding can't be the only answer, right?
No,
Because
it's
there's a
absolutely not.
safety issue. So we need context behind why are we looking at something from an action standpoint. I think it depends upon, what it's gonna take from you. If we can get that context and have the opportunity to discuss that before we're doing an action, it may take 2 meetings.
And that's okay. I mean, in this example, I agree that there wasn't probably enough background here and why it's always show up on your agenda. So you have every right and should say, okay, wait a minute, come back and tell us why this is so important, what the issue is, what the background is, and that's fine. Sometimes, hopefully, we'll do a better job in hitting that mark instead of missing that mark. But yeah, I mean, we'll try to.
Is it out of the question to say, okay, if we're gonna have it on January 18th agenda, we have to have information for that meeting by January 10th. And if it's not there by January 10th, it goes to February.
That's fine. I mean, you need to understand what time period you're in as far as comfort level goes. Do you need a week? Do you need 10 days? What is it? So if it was an 18th, you're saying by January 10th. So basically a week before, you should have it in your mailboxes.
It's typically Friday before, and new to send the links out, but it's the 3 days prior to any public meeting, agenda packets are posted. So for city council meetings, they're posted on Thursdays for a Monday meeting, so they have the weekend. So that's typically, but if that's something that needs to be backed up a week, I just have to know to adjust deadlines from other people.
But we can provide you with packets before the posting date. I mean, that's we can still post 3 days before, but if the board wants them a week before, that's fine.
Is it appropriate to, like, we had a lot of questions about this thing with the fields, is it appropriate to say, hey, what were the other bids? What did this cover? Can we ask
Absolutely.
that beforehand? Or?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, oh, sure. I would think so. I think if you have questions, obviously, it's even better for us to be prepared to answer those questions if you give it to us beforehand. I mean, if you have questions, you should send Jamie an email and say, I want to know about what these are about. And then we send that response out to you and to the rest of the board, because they should be interested in what that is. Not that we should have communication back and forth with emails, but just one-way
One-way.
discussion. That makes this meeting a lot easier if you have that background.
I think
That's not, that's an easy thing.
the other part of that, I would flip to you and say, when do you want to vote? I mean, it depends upon, you know,
I want you to vote when you're comfortable.
right, and so I think it depends upon the situation and whether or not we've gotten the information we need, but it cannot be.
You know, there's always.
We need context and background is the other thing that we need for this,
Fine.
and so.
Especially for the first time things come forward,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
this one.
That's fine. I mean, there's always gonna be those situations
Yep.
where it's emergency or we don't have time or something, but those are unusual.
That should be the
So,
exception. Yeah.
But yeah, no, if you need more context or you're not happy with the report, I have no problem saying, okay, we'll wait, or you need more information, we'll come back. That's what, you're the board to make some of those decisions. You're responsible for those decisions, or at least kind of approving them. So you need, if you're not comfortable with it, that's okay by me. I mean, you have to be comfortable. Now, if it's, when I say comfortable, everybody's got the right information, not that you're gonna vote, 4-3 or 3-4, that's a vote, but knowing that you have enough information to make a decision whether you're going forward or against it.
Yeah, but it got answered.
Oh, good.
Commissioner Gary, you agree?
Okay, so where are we at as far as the Marina lease?
So the Marina Lease, I emailed that out to you. Commissioner Geyer, I think, was going to do a brief update today, but she and I have communicated, she's volunteered to help start doing some of the research on your boat club and what other communities they're in, what other agreements do they have in place. It expires to November 30th of this year. So we will start those conversations, and Commissioner Geyer has already been in communication with me on that, so
November 1st.
November 1st, thank you.
Yeah,
I
just
don't
a
have it in
point
front of
that
me,
they're
but
going to ask for more slips, but that's gonna be difficult because they're restricted by the DNR regs, so there's gonna be a lot of mess going on with that.
So I
so
guess,
that's an upcoming project for this year to be reviewing that.
So can I
Actually-
talk to Commissioner
Marina,
Guyer
maybe?
about that?
Oh, I was gonna say, if it's the marina and that's an agenda item, maybe we could talk about that more when we get to the agenda, or the commissioner updates
Okay,
on that
okay.
one. That would fall under the commissioner updates.
Yep.
Is there anything else on this subject and kind of the things we talked about before?
Just a comment, because, just lay it out to us, like, when would you want it? Well, that depends on the issue, for sure. And so I don't think we are able to just say 8 days, 3 days, 4 days. But on the school board, it was just automatic that if it was anything of any kind of funding that was going to be done, that you'd never do it on the first reading, you'd always do it on the second. It gives the community a time to also address the issue. And so my answer would be, most of the times, we don't need all that much time, but we need at least 3 weeks, 3 days, certainly not a day. But on other issues, we might need a lot more time. So I wouldn't want to put out a date, how many times we need it. I leave that up to the people that are making the decision, how much time they think we
Well, and
need.
when there's a six-figure
Yeah.
budget item, if it's a discussion item on a previous meeting, now we all kind of have discussed it, we tell you what we need back, then that makes sense. Obviously, if it's a safety that needs to be done right away, that's the exception.
Right.
So I think for this particular example tonight, it just might have been like the perfect storm of when I received it and unfortunately out of the office and wasn't available to answer any questions. I think how it was handled tonight, I did put it on as a regular agenda item per the request I received. And I think how it was handled tonight of we need more information is completely acceptable given the circumstances of this is fairly, new to myself as well coming in. And what I do from there is take your list of questions and do that follow-up. So I think how this particular example was handled is okay. And there might be other situations like that. And as a commission, to Minister Casey's point, you have to feel comfortable. And if there's something you're missing that I don't have the answer to at the meeting at that time, it's okay to come back. Most items are a couple we can get through a couple meetings, or we could call a special meeting if it was a time sensitive item. So if there's something missing, I always try to say, let me know if you have questions, or try to get some of that information. This one I think is definitely a kind of a unique situation, given circumstances, but like I said, happy to get more information and come back with that, so.
One example. I mean, the bottom line is, we don't want to read about it in the newspaper or hear about it from constituents. That's not how we want to hear about it. We want to hear it here first versus the other way around, because it puts us in a position where we can either talk educated on the topic and either in support or not, or we can say, what are you talking about? Because I didn't get to watch the council meeting, or whatever it may be. So that's the bottom line. However that works for all of you on that side, we don't want to hear about it through the newspaper first, or constituents first. We'd like to have the opportunity to hear it.
Well, I'd say that I'm encouraged by what we've done tonight. Having Mr. Casey here has been really helpful, and I look forward to having some better communication, better communication. Appreciate being here.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So we move on to Belts Park Master Plan.
All right, so this is a discussion, it's more of an update and an opportunity for the Parks Commission to weigh in, and I know this was also one of those last questions of process that came up in our meetings at the end of 2021. But Belts Park Master Plan, we did, tonight you do have a updated concept plan, which really, I'll go through it, not much has really changed. The layout of the master plan pretty much remains the same that we had come to a conclusion with as a commission in October of this year, of 2021. So you have an updated plan here, and you also have an updated cost analysis. So just as a reminder, the master planning phase of this project is the vision for the park and what amenities you want in the park and what that's gonna look like. So that's the master plan phase. The cost analysis associated with that is your estimate of what it's gonna take to build this out. So that's the phase we're in right now. This is our final version of the master plan with the updated cost analysis. So I wanted to share that with you, that we are back on track with that. It's a little, a couple months later than we had hoped, but we're still on track with everything else. The next step in this process is the implementation phase. So we then need to start looking at our resources that we have. So we look at our park dedication funds. The DNR grant is something we are going to be applying to for this, it's due March 30th of this year. We got some funds from the Rotary, and look at other ways we can potentially fund this, and then we'll build out the implementation plan for this project. With that being said, I'm gonna bring this up, and Minister Casey, if you have any other questions or comments for him tonight on this, but we are back on track and are gonna start writing that grant application here that will come forward for review from the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission.
So, unless I'm missing something, this isn't exactly the last one we
No,
saw.
Not at
So
all.
you're making it sound like we're just now kind of rubber stamping what we've already seen. And I feel like this one's a little changed.
This one, I agree, has changed.
A lot changed.
I believe all that they did, though, was they just added some more of the graphics to the layout, but the amenities should still be.
There was no irrigation in the last one we saw, was there?
No pour and play.
Zip line.
I don't remember that. Grills, biofiltration area, drinking fountain. And then just looking at the stuff that we have bleachers that are aluminum that should be able to be used for the new belts. We have bleachers, so we have 4 bleachers over there, or 4 benches, 2 bleachers, 6 garbage cans, 2 recycles. So I think there's a lot that has changed.
Are you looking at the cost analysis?
The cost analysis, yes.
So we can, with that cost analysis, we can go up or down from there. I think as we get into that implementation phase, we don't need to buy the 6 garbage cans, or those can be funded in a different way. They did put that on here as what this would really look like, but I think we still have that opportunity to eliminate it. I think the big thing is the amenities and the layout within the park.
Well, is the ball field just a ball field, or is it I don't know the technical term, I'm sorry, I'm not,
Competition kind of feel.
competition ball field? It should be just a standard, go out and throw a ball around. T-ball, because this is what this park is.
So it is included in the cost analysis to have that be a game field with the irrigation.
Yeah, Jason, they would call that, it was all ag line, they call them a skin field.
Skin field? Okay, thank you.
Well, the skins that play up there don't warrant all of that.
Or the
That's a
Or the
neighborhood.
removal of such.
Okay.
I mean, from a layout perspective, I think, I mean, do we agree it looks pretty close to that's kind of what we wanted, so
Well,
I think.
I'm kind of curious because presently there's the basketball courts and tennis courts are flip-flop.
Flip-flop, yeah.
And so I guess I'm wondering, are we incurring extra cost to flip them now? Or what
I
we,
guess you're gonna have to take up all those courts anyways.
Yeah, in our subcommittee meeting, I think we had touched on it here before, was that they're pretty much gonna need to be excavated completely. Whether we do asphalt courts, whether we do concrete with sport court, however that looks. Now, I would question the costs in there as far as the courts, and are we doing sport court, and what's the difference, because there's cost savings there, but I think that would come in, like Jamie was saying, to the implementation stage.
Yeah, just
and
let
are
me
they still
go,
lighted?
if I can, what we want to do here is, and the way this should go, is that once we've agreed on the concept, which is pretty much, like you said, it hasn't really changed much except for some of the drinking fountains and so forth. Then we authorize the plans and specs and we put it out for bid. What we really need to do is get the numbers, what the true numbers are. So once we put it out for bid and it comes in at, let's just say it comes in at $2 million. That's when we come back and say, okay, we don't have $2 million. That's when we start to cut it out. So what you do is you create the bid so that the contractors bidding on it know that you're going to reduce those, and you meet with them and say, okay, what are we gonna take out? And let's just take, if we leave the irrigation in, now that's coming out. The sport, cheaper to put asphalt in than it is concrete. So that's when you start to run through after the numbers are in, because you really wanna know what the numbers, and what you can afford. That's when you start to reduce or to modify what the design is going to be at the very end. What you're gonna put in, what you're gonna leave out.
But some of what the subcommittee did, and correct me if I'm wrong, subcommittee, was that this was a neighborhood park. So there was elements here that we didn't feel were needed. So to take that forward as part of getting an estimate when we've already made the decision that we didn't need some of those things doesn't seem appropriate. So if we had the conversation about the ball field, for example, we had the conversation about no irrigation. So why would we ask somebody to bid on irrigation when we've already said we don't think that's a necessity there? Again, what would our role be then if we as a committee, using that as a specific example, said we didn't feel we needed irrigation?
Well, I think that, I guess my point on this is, this will be the high end of it, and as we move into that implementation plan and we see what that total cost is gonna be, if something needs to be cut or reduced or changed, I think that's where you could look at that as not being part of it. So this would be, I know that there's, maybe it's a community field or maybe it's a game field, but I think from a maintenance perspective, the stance was that, this irrigating, it's gonna make sure that the field is nice to used and played on. So if that's not needed, it's something that can be eliminated. But regardless, that's in the layout portion, this is where the ball field will be. So I think as we move forward, if that's one of the negotiation items of, let's just keep it a community, is it a community field or is it a game field? I think the key for the master plan is this is where the field is gonna be, and if there's that further discussion or, final decision on that, we can simply not include the irrigation.
So we made that final decision on that, and so again, all of us being also taxpayers of the community of Forest Lake, that we're looking at this not only from a park perspective, but we were looking at this from a fiscal responsibility perspective. And if this committee has already said that doesn't need to be a game field, it needs to be, we want to see it as a community field and we don't want irrigation, then why would we give somebody the opportunity to bid on making it a game field with irrigation?
I think we've seen this as a community, where people bring their lawn chairs there and sit and watch their kids play t-ball, or they have practice there for something. It just doesn't need to be Fenway Park.
Well, and that's the other reason. A few years ago, we did a land swap, and we did the land swap so we could get another ball field on Fenway, and then they had the houses and townhouses built. So we have land there for another ball field that will tie in with Fenway, but we don't have anything for just people to go out and do that.
I think what I hear is the bigger question is, why was the decision changed after the commission had looked at one way, and why was it then added or changed? Then it gets very confusing again for us to explain to anybody what is going on. And again, when you do this, we haven't addressed the parking with St. Peter's yet, and I feel really badly about that because we just push these things off, and there has been good rapport with, we're going to need that parking, and so what do we need? So, who makes the decision, and when is that decision made, I guess?
Yeah, it was brought forward as an idea to improve the field from a staff, so that's why it was included, and I think from there, we have to work through that to see what the final, if it's community field or a ball field for games, so, I guess that's the information that I have on that of irrigating it will have it be aesthetically more appealing because the grass will remain green and it's better for maintenance. So I think we can get to that final determination in the implementation phase of it.
So the question to back up and not focus so much just on the field is the question, right? So maybe in my mind, the question is, so what's next? If we take this back, or the subcommittee, I don't know how that would work, take this back now and go through the line items and, kind of make those little changes, whatever those changes are, maybe we put a fence up, we don't do the irrigation, whatever those are, where does that go?
So a next step in this, important for the grant opportunity is, we know we're gonna have a 0 to 5 playground. We know we need a 5 to 12 playground, right? A key next step is writing and releasing an RFP to our playground manufacturers to start providing proposals. We can give them a budget. So in here, the budget that was included for playground equipment, for example, ages 2 to 12 inclusive play was $250,000. So one step in this is writing that RFP, saying our budget is $250,000, and see what they come back with. Now, they could go a little higher, they could get a little lower, but we need to start getting what specific equipment are we gonna purchase there. That's one step in this. And we also really need to start, for the grant application, same thing for the structure, the warming house facility. So Bolton and Mank is going to work on that piece to reach out to different companies and see what they can provide and start honing in on the specific amenities of those items.
I guess, Jimmy, maybe I didn't state my question quite right. I get that process of moving but what happens when staff doesn't like what we recommend? I guess that's what I'm asking, is if we go back and do the work again, and we come back and we say, how about these changes? But maybe Dave looks at it and says, ooh, from a maintenance perspective, that's not the best plan or whatever, are we gonna be here again?
I was just gonna say, then why not have, like you were talking about, get us everybody in the room.
Right.
Yeah, this is goofy going back and forth and we make a decision and then all of a sudden it's all changed.
So just for clarity, it seems to me, and I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the real major difference between what you already did and this is the irrigation, is there? I mean, we have a couple.
No, it's the ball field, it's,
I know, but I mean,
It's
the
the
irrigation.
decision that
for-
it's a
made.
decision that we all made.
Right.
We made it, and then we were gonna try to come back, okay, we know there's gonna be a neighborhood ball field, we know that.
All right,
That's
but
what
if
we
you
want.
take the irrigation, I mean,
And we don't want irrigation because it's a
Fine.
neighborhood area.
okay.
We don't want
So
that
it's the
stuff.
irrigation is the main issue in this one?
Well, I mean, if
Understand.
we're going through the estimate, I mean, some of these numbers are way out of play.
But
And we can only do so much next year.
That I understand.
But if we went back and looked at, again, I'd have to look through my pile here. We had a meeting and we talked about this. We had a plan in front of us and we approved that plan with the next step being taking the cost estimate and walking through the cost estimate to see, did these things on this list make sense to us? If yes, then we would leave them. And then we were going to eventually need to look at probably phasing this in. And so from a bigger picture perspective, plan was approved, plan looks different.
So let's jump to the list then. We already know that irrigation is something that wasn't anticipated, correct? So that comes out. So we all know that also we're going to have to redo the ball field no matter what. I mean, it's gonna have to be graded and probably some, whatever they do for a regular neighborhood ball field. But what else is here that's not, I mean, here's your list. When you say you wanted to go through your list, here's the list.
Well, I mean, so, just for example, I mean, like in my eyes, I don't remember doing the pour and play. I don't
It
remember
was-
doing the pour and play.
We've decided as a committee over the last 3 years that every park we're
Where we're
gonna
gonna-
just go and.
It was
I
just
made a mistake
listed,
then. I
it
made a
was
mistake then.
listed differently, it was just
Okay.
surfacing.
I think,
Okay,
and I'm just kind of hearing here too, and I get, guys, this cost is out of whack. I mean, we can't do this project at this cost. But these are boilerplate numbers that a engineering firm's using. These aren't real hard bids. In order to actually get something that we can discuss and take off the list outside of irrigation, because we all agreed we didn't think that was gonna be necessary, but 16,000 on a $2 billion project is minuscule. It's not something that we need to spend a ton of time arguing about here. But until we get actual cost for a pavilion, and I see that they did downgrade that price quite a bit from the original. But then it looks like, maybe playground equipment, to me, 2 to 12, 250,000 seems high. Maybe it's not, but, we can take it from there once we start seeing those bids. My only concern with that is, Jamie, was something you had said when you were talking about going to the manufacturers. If we tell them our budget's 250,000, that's what they're gonna give us. And that's probably too high.
And so from that process, then you can say, this is what we could get for 250. We don't need that much. Let's scale it back or remove X, Y, and Z. So that's a good process. You know what your means are with what you're working with. And that's what a lot of communities do. They say, here's our budget. Give us your best proposal for a 0 to 5 and a 5 to 12 and see what you get from all of them. And that's where you start looking at, do we like this? Do we like that? Let's switch this out. And then that's where you start fine tuning and bringing that budget down.
Well, it gives us a negotiating chip too. This
To
fit,
to your point, you're correct. Let's agree the irrigation will take out. Okay, fine. So all the rest is pretty much what you agreed to, for in place now has been decided. So the next, we have two things we have to do. One is we have to say, okay, this is what we want. It seems like if it's the irrigation is out, then it's pretty close to what you want. Am I right or wrong on that?
I think the layout, again, and the amenities that were talking about are what we had agreed on.
What about the biofiltration area? That wasn't in there before?
That wasn't ours.
I
And
guess
that may be something
That
that,
wasn't in there.
I know, but that may be something that had to be added. I'll check on that. because
stormwater, I see it's under
It
stormwater, so.
it might be a must.
Mhm.
I'm just not
Okay.
sure. I don't want to comment because I don't know
Yeah.
biofiltration as well as I probably should, but we'll find that out. But let's get past the that and let's say, okay, this is close to what you, or at least pretty darn close to what you agreed to. Right?
It's the,
So the next step then is to say, okay, Bolton and Mank, this is what we're doing. Prepare the bid package. That does two things today. It sets us up to have the ability to apply for the grant, which has to be due on what,
30?
March 30th, so we don't have that much time. So that, and we can put it out in the street and see what the real numbers, like you mentioned, these are just engineering estimates, which
They're always high.
we do it all the time. We do it with streets, we do it with everything. So now's the chance we say, okay, this is what we want. Here's the plan. Hit it out, let's see what happens.
So that was originally our next step last time we
Be
met,
now the next step.
and that was originally our next step.
I don't-
When we approved the plan at that following meeting,
Well,
we were gonna get the actual cost to be able to look at that,
I
so.
guarantee you this time.
So I was
That's
just gonna
what happened.
ask, so for February, are we going to see the actual
Oh, you won't have
cost?
it by February.
Okay,
You'll have it by March, maybe.
okay,
But we not,
But-
and now's the time to bid it because it's the winter. And you want to bid almost everything you can in the winter. Because you bid this thing in June for a July construction, you're gonna pay through the nose. We want to bid this thing as fast as we can.
But you're saying in March, Jamie, how long would it take to write a grant on this? If March 30th is what is due, but we're not gonna see this until March.
Well,
So-
the grant doesn't need to have firm actual bid numbers. They need to, we will consider this will be close to what the grant will have. I've authorized Bolton and Mank to write that grant, so we don't have to try to do it ourselves, because we just don't have the time or the staff to do that. So they will be preparing the grant, they will use close to what these numbers are. Because the grant's only interested in kind of what the scope is. They know that bids change. You know, you almost never have your bids when you write a grant. You have the grant first, and if you get it, then you do your bidding. But, you know, we'll see. So, yeah, that doesn't matter to the grant writing process at all.
when do we have to bring it to the city council? Because our original goal, or,
What I'll do is put it on the city council agendas to authorize plans and specs
okay,
and bidding at this next Monday's meeting. We put in an agenda item, they can approve that we authorize Bolton and Mank to prepare plans and specs and bid. So,
with the caveat that it's still coming back here for us to finalize,
well, you're gonna have to anyways. I mean, yeah, once,
making sure.
yeah, no, it's authorizing plans and specs isn't authorizing purchasing or authorizing construction. It's just saying, put the stuff together and let's go.
And the bids could come in
Double
way
it.
higher, and we might say, we're not doing it, you know,
Yeah, I mean,
we're gonna have to reassess what we're doing.
I don't know how many of you have been through this, but yeah, you sit down once the bids are in and you say, okay, well, maybe we only need one tennis court and one basketball court instead of two each. That cuts X number of dollars. Maybe we don't put those volleyball courts in and that starts off another couple of dollars. And maybe we, whatever. So that's gonna be your next process.
That's the piece that we were expecting to be our next.
Well, I can't explain why that didn't happen, but it will happen now.
And I think a key for the grant application, one key component is the DNR Outdoor Recreation Grant. A good application is for safety and accessibility improvements. So that's why I had previously mentioned we gotta hone in on, or at least get some designs back on an inclusive playground, so that as part of our grant, that if that's what we're going for, we can show, well, here's what we're looking to do. It's gonna be inclusive, features and accessibility with port and place surfacing. Similarly with the building, that it's, handicap accessible and such. So that's why those are the two items that we will be focusing on in the very near future to determine what the grant application will be written for, and I'll work with Bolton and Mank on their recommendation. It is a match up to $300,000, so that easily could just be playground equipment. It could be playground equipment and the pavilion together. So that's what we'll be working with Bolton and Mank on for that. It doesn't have to be for everything because it's up to $300,000. So we'll structure that to write us our best grant application for the park.
So our next steps on this is that the irrigation is out, it's a community field. You're gonna check on the biofiltration, and we can expect to have a review back here of the actual costs and another discussion on what stays and goes within the plan.
I can't tell you when the bids will go out or what the return dates are going to be.
I
but-
didn't say when, I was
No,
just
I
recapping
yeah,
the
but
to-do.
Yeah, that's correct. We should go to the council for plans and specs and then get them true plans and specs because these are still at the concept phase.
Yeah, just another thing we haven't discussed yet is the phasing in. And again, we as a commission, we're pretty much all together on what we wanted. And how does that change when it goes past us? Like, you know, somebody else thinks better of it, or we could do something differently when we've already made the decision that the warming house situation should be first on the agenda. And again, we're spending a lot of money. And when you have to put that with Fenway and you have to realize, you know, this has been on the docket for 2 years. And we've still got the Rotary money. I was just asked again the other meeting that we were at with the chamber, and they said, yeah, and if we need Rotary money, I think the parks are just not going to use it. And I said, oh, no, we're going to use it. It's just a matter, we got to get ourselves together and get something done so that their money that they gave in good faith isn't just sitting there wondering what's going to happen to it. So again, you know, I know I'm a little impatient, but over 2 years of discussing this and all coming together, that the warming house would be a better fit for the church and the parking, as well as what was number one on the community survey, what they thought was the most important. So now we talk a lot about coming back and we're going to get prices and everything, but when do we make the decision on what we're going to phase in first if we have to phase?
Can't make phasing decisions until you have prices. And once you have the bid out on the street, once you get the bidders back and you determine what the true costs are, then you decide two things. Are we gonna cut stuff out? Maybe the bids are low and you can add stuff. And/or how are you going to phase it if you don't have enough money? That's when you say, okay, bids came back at $1.5 million. We don't have $1.5 million, we're gonna cut this out, but here's what we think is most important and goes first. That's why I say on Monday, we put the authorization for bids and specs, get Bolton and Mank to do that, send them out in the street. Hopefully by, let's see, probably May, maybe you'll be able to start to have that discussions, I would think. And then, once you've made that, you can determine when that phasing and how that phasing is gonna happen. But you can never determine phasing until you know what the true prices are. Just can't.
I would also think we'd want some engineering or some input there, because there might be things that make a lot of sense to put together.
Well,
The
we'll
same-
have whoever you need in the room.
Oh, yeah.
If you want the engineers in the room and Dave in the room, yeah, we'll put them in the room.
Yeah, and just quick on the plans and specs themselves. I would like to see, knowing there could be a cost savings in the basketball courts and pickleball court and tennis courts there. If we can ask for whatever Bolton and Mank has spec now, which I believe is the sport court option, and then have an alternate bid for an asphalt option.
So is it spec to sport court right now?
I believe, based on the cost, I believe it was, or no?
I
It
believe,
looks concrete to me.
I think that they, through a consultation with Bolton and Mank, I believe that the sport court was out and they would just do, because they have to tear it up anyhow, that it would be better to do
just the
yeah,
concrete.
concrete.
Okay.
So that'll be clear in the bids
Fine,
and specs.
fair enough.
But, I mean, should we have another bid in there for asphalt on that one?
I'm not sure it's,
Right.
if you're not doing sport court, it often is asphalt. That's why I'm confused. You usually don't have concrete under tennis and
Right.
basketball. You usually have
Well,
asphalt.
Let's just clarify.
We have concrete
Yeah.
concrete at Fenway, at the pickleball court.
We-
Okay, is that a sport court?
No, we had them come in and shot blast the surface,
Yep.
paint over it, but
Yep.
we took advantage of an asset that was there to do that, so it's not a traditional way to
Traditionally,
do it.
under basketball court, in my experience, I'm sorry,
Yes.
not traditionally, my experience is basketball and tennis courts are asphalt with basketball usually can stay asphalt. The tennis courts have some kind of a rubberized kind of paint or coating over it, but we'll clarify that. It We should be looking at asphalt, really, I think. If you're not doing sport court, you're probably looking at asphalt.
Right. Are we moving on to all this to do on that? So then we are at Athletic Facility Advisory Committee, 7A.
All right, just gonna grab my notes from here.
I think.
All right, so just a quick update. We are transitioning our Fenway Advisory Committee to an Athletic Facilities Advisory Committee. We are gonna meet quarterly, and it's gonna be the fourth Thursday of every quarter. So our first meeting is gonna be January 27th. So initially, the first meeting is gonna be myself, Al Hauge, the president of FLA, Paul Kozak, represented from FLA, and Kyle Young, I believe, from the school district, and we're gonna start building that committee up even more. But I just wanted to let you know, we are starting to transition that committee and have a meeting.
Is there a liaison to that committee from the commission?
We don't yet, so I can certainly, I do need representation. Previously, we did, it was the Fenway Athletic Advisory Committee, and it was Commissioner Miller and Commissioner Steenblock, I believe were the two that were, there was the third one. I can't remember, but they were on there. It's essentially the same facility. We can, if you want to join different committees this year, just certainly let me know and we can talk about that, but
I would
that
like
is
to.
happening. So that's all, just a update that's moving forward. And I know we added an update on the Belts warming house or warming houses. Just to let you know, we had warming houses opened last weekend. We have 2 staff to run both warming houses, so we are staffing as we're able to. I do have 1 or 2 other people that did inquire now, so we are, like a lot of other places, experiencing staffing challenges. And so the hours will be our regular hours as we're able to. So I'm gonna get some communication up on our website, hoping to fill most of the shifts. So our regular staffing hours are Saturdays and Sundays from noon to 6 at Belts Park.
And my discussion on that was, living so close, I can't help but go by it 10 times a day. That over Christmas vacation, there was no lights on, there's no warming house open, and what a sad thing that is for the community to see that beautiful ice, and then they had to park their cars along the side and put their headlights on so that they could see the skating. And I thought, why in the world, was it a staff thing that we didn't do? And if so, are there notes on the door so that people don't have to wonder what's going on, that, due to staffing, we're not. I did call Dave at the time because you weren't, gone, you were gone. And he got the lights on. It was something that he didn't know was, I guess you're on a timer.
There should be on a timer,
And
so.
the timer wasn't working right, and so he did get the one light on. I don't know if that's all you get on maybe that's all you get for that ring. But anyway, that helped to have the
Yep.
lights on. But still, no warming house open at all.
It wasn't open for the season yet. The rinks were just at a point where people could start skating on them. But they were still working on maintaining the ice. We had that really warm December, so it was a little later start, and then warming houses just weren't open at that time yet. So, it is a staffing challenge, and hopefully we can get some more people up. But we did have them open this past weekend, all the shifts. We're scheduled for this weekend, I think, except 1 shift we can't cover, but we're working on getting those up and running as best as we can. And this isn't just a City of Forest Lake issue. I've seen other communities close their warming houses due to staffing as well. And it's, I'm gonna try my best to get it open as much as we can this season, so.
But during the week?
Yeah.
I see a lot of people skating at night, again, by headlights rather than whatever.
So for the past several years, we've never staffed during the week. That was a cut years ago where our regular hours are just the weekends. I may have the budget, but now this year it might be more of a staffing challenge. I'm happy to have it open during the week if we're able to, if someone's available to work that. So I am working on trying to get it open as much as we can with staff. I think it's more of a staffing challenge this year than it is the financial resource piece of it, so.
Then would it help to put a sign on the door out there, help wanted, call?
Yes, I will be getting that out this week, and they just opened this past weekend, and I was out most of the week, unfortunately, so I will have that up if not tomorrow, before the weekend when they're open. So the community understands that here are regular hours, which those are currently posted. I'm just gonna add the caveat that these may close due to staffing or weather, which is what other communities are doing right now as well.
The help wanted was posted by me in response to a Facebook Forest Lake Happening
Okay.
question
Goodness you're
about
on that. You get more
staffing.
information than we do.
So I did link them back
I
to
did see
the
that.
job posting.
And I did do extensive recruiting. It's been to the school, it's been to other, throughout the community for several months, and no one's applied, and it's a difficult position to fill.
There is a link with the high school employment opportunities, and I've never seen us listed there, but there are many places in town because that's the age kid you want to be there. And my last comment on that would be, for years, we've tried to understand that that's a pleasure rink, not a hockey rink. And so again, there's been many, many hockey players up there, little ones, but hockey sticks. And I wonder if you could put on the note too, that this is a pleasure rink only, so hockey would be directed to the hockey rink.
Yeah, I
Because-
posted the job to that school listing 2 months ago, so they should have, I did see it on there, maybe they took it down because
I
it
did
was
see it.
there, and then there is a sign that says no hockey. So it's an
No
enforcement
hockey
piece for,
sticks, no
know.
hockey sticks, maybe, I don't know.
So I can add more, but it's, it is an enforcement piece at that point, and, when staff is there, they do enforce that, so.
I think we're gonna get Karen a whistle in those 10 trips she makes.
Karen's just gonna be walking by.
How many years?
And she does make 10 at least a day.
At least today, but it just would help, because people going, they say, well, they were little kids, but see, people going by, they see hockey sticks on there and they go, no, we can't go over there, so that's the reason why no hockey sticks, because people going by assume that they can't bring their little ones because there's hockey being played on there. So that was for years what we tried to decide, and sometimes it works. But having the notice on it would really help.
I'll make a bigger notice and post it in red, so you can
There's a
see it
big
from your
sign in the
house.
warming house window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For hockey sticks?
It doesn't say sticks.
No.
Hockey.
Just says no
This
hockey.
is
No
hockey, that's the
hockey.
same
I mean,
thing.
Well, no,
If it
because
walks
they
like a
think they're
duck
just
and it quacks
practicing
like a
hockey,
duck.
they're having games and whatever. Some even brought a little thing, what do you call that, the net? They even had nets that they brought with them, just to make sure they could play this little hockey. But anyway, that was my thing on belts, that it didn't appear open at all during the vacation, the lights were not on, and it just.
It
seemed-
wasn't open yet for the season.
All right, so we had our commissioner updates. I was wondering, Jamie, I didn't see in I had requested the staff memo in reference to the open forum item that we had.
Oh, Bayview Park? I
Yes.
can just share an update, a verbal update on that. So just going back to the previous meeting on Bayview Park, we had a resident come forward about shrubs that were on city property that were removed by Public Works. Just an update was that the resident had that request, as you recall, that we trim some of the trees that were encroaching on their property. Public Works did notice that there was the presence of buckthorn, which is a invasive species, so Public Works did decide to remove all of the shrubs that contain buckthorn. Further comments from Public Works Director just indicating that it was verbally explained to the resident that he was able to plant something on his property line if he wanted a buffer between the park and his property, or he can extend his fence to the west. Public Works just, they would say that they're firm on not going back and doesn't want to set a precedent because we don't have any other parks in the city where we've created a buffer between the property lines. So that's the stance from Public Works. It's just an update. I don't have any recommendations if we should plant something and what that would cost, but that is the update from Public Works, that the resident could be able to provide and plant on their property line, and just wants to be cautious of setting a precedent if we do put the plantings in on our city property.
So essentially, we asked for a recommendation of what could be planted there and what it would cost. And I still don't have that, so I'll ask for the third time for a recommendation of what could be put there and what it could cost. And I did go out, I sent you some pictures, I don't know if you want to pull them up for me, but I went out and took a look at it just to try to understand this piece of feedback, because I wanted to see where he was in correlation to the park. I think this is a unique situation in that he is right on top of the park. And I also see this as, you know, there was originally something there, it got taken down, so I don't see it as setting a precedence because you're potentially replacing something that you took out there, and it is a direct cut through. It's not like any other park that we have. So I will again ask for a cost on what it would take to put something there and a recommendation as to what maintenance would recommend being put there. And I think in the PowerPoint we had last month, that was one of the pictures, ironically, there, you could see the actual, when there was there, but this is what I looked at. And as you can see, it is right. I can see where he's arguing people do cut through his yard because that buffer is removed.
Yeah,
And
there's
so-
no- There's nothing
Well,
to
yeah.
delineate park, my.
Well, I don't think, do all of our parks have delineation between the adjacent property?
No, but I think what's different about this one is that this is the only park I can think of where there isn't spacing or, like, I looked at the one over off of Farnham. The small one, I can't think of the name right now. But anyhow, there's common land around that one. There's the one Sherwood that one's got some common land. This is the only one that I can see where look at Belts. Look at the house right next to Belts. There's a fence and
There's a
trees
fence there,
there.
But was it the case that there were shrubs there before that buckthorn grew
Into
within
the
it,
shrubs,
and therefore there was
a barrier.
a barrier,
Yeah.
and
There were
we let
trees, he
the
said.
buckthorn
They were
grow,
from
and
his
so
road.
they took it all. So if that's the case, it would simply be a matter of replacing those
Replacing.
shrubs that
Replacing.
previously were there.
Which is what we did when the trees died in Fenway, we replaced those trees. So there was something there, and now there's nothing. And we asked for a staff memo on a recommendation of what could be placed there and what the cost would be. So I would again ask for that and like to see it next month. And this is what it looks like. I mean, I hate to, I agree with him. It is in very close proximity to the park and there is no buffer there. I wouldn't like it if I lived there.
It'd be nice for you to have information to go back to him that we're looking at it, we, feel his
Yeah.
pain, we know we're looking to do something, just don't know what or how.
Yep.
But at least the communication, again, is just so important.
It's not precedent setting because we're replacing,
Right.
so.
Any other commissioner updates?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have much to update, but Jamie was looking for someone to volunteer to figure out what's going on with the boat clubs before we get to having to redo the contract, so I offered, and so I've just started kind of cataloging where all the boat club is, and then I'll try and get some information to see if any of the cities around us, what they do, and if it's different than ours, and I'll come back here with information as I get it. And if anybody has any information or thoughts, send them to me, or we can talk. Great.
And mine is probably mute for tonight because there's so much going on and we don't have the funds to do what we'd like to do. But, that park booklet that we talk about all the time too, putting together something so the community would know where our parks are and what the amenities are on them. And I think once we get through the next big phase of the couple things we're doing, we have to put that on a high agenda item again. The Sledding Hill. I know you went out there too and you thought maybe the trees were a little close at the middle. And they might be, but talk about neighborhoods that don't want us to have it marked. They love to use the Sledding Hill, but most people in our community they don't even know it's there. And so if we ever get that park booklet done, that would be nice to let people know it's available.
Anybody else have updates?
And Kathy, I mean, I just wanted to bring that up to make sure everybody knew, and I found tonight one didn't know, and that collectively, are we going to do anything, or have we all singly done something? I have too, so just to make sure that,
We can touch base on
Maybe
that.
we can do that after the meeting.
Yep.
After we adjourn.
I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes if anyone wants to discuss that.
Hearing no other items, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
second,
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you.
congratulations.